I almost said 2, but it's just 1 week. 7 days away from the Iowa caucuses, and Donald Trump is back on top by a wide margin. But will his voters show up on caucus day? That's a big question. I'm Trish Regan. Welcome, everyone, to the Intelligence Report. A new Fox News poll has Trump at 34% compared to Ted Cruz's 23%. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are neck and neck right now, trying to win over the state's Democratic voters. All of this as reports surface that billionaire businessman and former NYC mayor, and actually my former boss, Mike Bloomberg, may launch a third-party presidential bid. So with Trump on top in 2 key states, does he have this nomination locked up, we're asking? And if so, what's the establishment to do? Joining me right now is former George W. Bush advisor Brad Blakeman and progressive radio host Leslie Marshall. Lots of good stuff to talk about. But first, I'm going to start with Brad. Is Trump going to be the nominee?
Look, don't look at those polls. I know Trump likes to quote the polls all the time, but really the only polls that matter are the ones where people are actually doing something. And in Iowa, caucuses are like living room meetings, whether they're at VFWs or firehouses. You have to motivate people to go. They have to spend hours there. And then you have New Hampshire a week later, which is an actual secret ballot, the first in the nation. There's a lot of work that has to be done to motivate people on the ground. It's not enough to have a fan. You have to have a voter. And time will be really telling in the next 2 weeks whether or not Donald Trump's fan base is a voter base. And if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, I would say at that point he's probably inevitable. If he doesn't, he is not.
So I'm curious, do either of you, and I'll go to Leslie and see if she can weigh in on this, have any sense of what he's doing from an infrastructure standpoint to actually get these fans to go out and vote? I mean, this is one thing that Barack Obama was absolutely brilliant at, and he really was able to figure out where he needed those voters and really had the troops on the ground, so to speak, to bring these people out and bring them to the polls. Does Donald Trump have that kind of mechanism, Leslie, in place?
I honestly don't think so, and I think part of the problem has been Donald and his ego, quite frankly. I mean, coming in on his plane or his helicopter, speaking to people. Now he's staying at a Holiday Inn Express and going to church and taking it a bit more seriously, I think, certainly because in the past, not today's numbers, Ted Cruz was neck and neck with him. But the big thing here is when we look at those numbers, and I agree with Brad on this, you know, support in the polls is not necessarily a voter in a caucus. This is not a primary. And in addition, even if Donald Trump wins Iowa, it doesn't mean he'll be the nominee. Hello, Huckabee and Santorum in the past. And in addition to that, we also have to look at historically Democrats. Iowa normally calls Democrats more so than Republicans, who historically 43% of the time that would be a call. So I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump loses Iowa, but that doesn't mean he would lose the nomination necessarily when we just look at the numbers historically.
You got to be careful. He's got to be careful here not to get too cocky about it all. We saw some evidence of that over the weekend. Watch this, him talking about how he could actually even pull out a gun and shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and be okay.
The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
Brad, maybe he's right. You know, he was joking in that. Some of the media got all up in arms, and we saw a lot of people really freaking out on Twitter when he said that. But he was making a joke. Is he perhaps overestimating his opportunity here?
Yeah, and I think that's a politician's Achilles heel. You have to underpromise and overdeliver. That's what defies expectation. The facts are right now that Trump has so set the bar so high that if he doesn't win and win big using Trump vernacular, then he's a loser. And you know, if I were against him and he lost Iowa, came in second in New Hampshire, I would be playing that Barbara Walters interview where she pinned him down and said, if you're not winning, you're losing, right? And he said yes.
You know, Leslie, we've talked about Hillary Clinton before, and I think the consensus really at this point is if she winds up losing Iowa and New Hampshire, she's still going to plow forward, and she may still get the nomination. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
So
and
so
the
let
reason
me,
I do with the southern states, which have a much higher minority vote.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and we're
they
going to
have a
talk
much
about
higher
it a little
minority
later
vote
in the show,
southern
because
states.
she's really trying to play to that right now with talk of slavery reparations. But let me ask you about the wild card in all this. I mean, as if this race wasn't interesting enough, now there's talk of Mike Bloomberg, billionaire Mike Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, getting into this race as an independent. Leslie, could it happen?
I think it could happen. I think if anybody was going to do it, it should be now, and I think he might be the guy. I mean, he certainly has the money, he has experience, and he speaks to the majority of this nation in a sense. If you look, most of us are leaning more to the right fiscally, but more to the left socially. He bridges that gap. Also, he comes in at a time where there's not only great fragmentation in the Republican Party, but certainly a lot of disdain for their top two candidates right now, Trump and Cruz. And he might even get some Democrats who aren't happy with the selection of Hillary or Bernie, for that matter.
You know, I'll just share with you guys a little bit of intel. So I used to work for Mike Bloomberg in his news organization there, and I know that they looked pretty hard at this last time around. They concluded that he could not win, they being his team, that he could not win in 08. He's the kind of guy who doesn't necessarily want to do something unless he knows he's really good a shot at winning. And so that's very important to him. I would think, Brad, this time would probably be better than any. If you want to win as an independent, and we know historically how tough that is, this is a race that's very unlike any other one we've ever seen. So is this his last chance? I mean, he's not getting any younger.
Well, it would be very tough, even in these times, with the kind of division we're seeing in both parties, for a third party, an independent, to win. And this much is true, regardless of the circumstance, and that is the party apparatus in Republicans and Democrats is entrenched at the local level, the state level, and the federal level. You have apparatus on the ground that couldn't be duplicated for the type of money that even Bloomberg has.
Okay, I was going to say, I mean, he has got money. He could put $1 billion into this, no problem, right out of the gate. Here's what I wonder, though, Leslie. If he were to run, does this actually hurt the Democrats or the Republicans more? I mean, who's he going to take votes from, in your view?
Republicans, and that's why, please, Mayor Bloomberg, please, if you're watching, run. No, he would be the Ralph Nader for the right, and it certainly, I feel, would help Democrats, no question, hurt Republicans. It would split the party vote.
I mean, this is a guy who is very, very anti-gun. This is someone who, you know, yes, on the fiscal issues, Leslie, would probably have a lot of appeal to a lot of conservatives. But there's a conservative base out there that looks at things like, you know, his record on environmentalism and all this alternative energy that he's a big proponent of, that they're not fond of, and also a lot of voters that look at all he has done in terms of gun control, and they don't like that in the conservative base, Brad. I actually see him being able to siphon off voters from Bernie Sanders, clearly, or Hillary Clinton. What do you say?
I think he's going to be in a pox on both houses. He will appeal to both dissatisfaction on the right and the left, because that is an independent you have to do. I think he'd hurt both, and in the end, that's what spoilers do. And the question is, who does he hurt the most?
Well, I can tell you who the winner in all this probably is, and that's the media, because this just got all the more interesting, and it could get really good. Thank you so much, Brad and Leslie. I'm going to see you guys in just a moment. Thanks. All right, on Thursday, all right, with just 7 days to go before voters caucus in Iowa, the battle between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders is getting kind of personal. Bernie Sanders calling her campaign desperate and accusing her of unleashing a professional hitman to attack him on, of all things, slavery reparations. It's an issue that was brought up during his appearance on Meet the Press this weekend. Watch it.
Why do you stop short on that issue?
Well, for the same reason that Barack Obama has, and the same reason I believe that Hillary Clinton has. And that is, it is absolutely wrong and unacceptable that we have so much poverty in this country, and it is even worse in the African American community.
You didn't answer the question why you weren't in favor of reparations.
Well, again, it's the same reason that the president is not, and I think,
and what is that reason?
Secretary Clinton is not. We have got to invest in the future.
Invest in the future and not look back at the past. Of course, in all fairness here, Sanders really didn't answer that question. But again, in all fairness, would Hillary? I mean, of course, Chuck Don didn't bother asking her any of that. She was on his show, too. Leslie Marshall and Brad Blackman are back with us. And Brad, you know, this is amazing to me that suddenly slavery reparations are becoming a way to go after Bernie Sanders. I mean, this is all coming from the Hillary camp. Her people got out there last week and started questioning Sanders and his view on slavery reparations. I mean, is this just total desperation on her part?
This is what the Clintons do. They're great at it. They're great at destroying people. They have made a cottage industry of a vast right-wing conspiracy. And when it's not a right-wing conspiracy, it's a left conspiracy with Bernie. So,
come on,
Bernie, welcome to the club.
I mean, is this actually something? I'd like to hear her on record, Leslie, saying that she wants slavery reparations. And I'd like to hear also how she's going to pay for all this. Do you think this is smart tactically, however, for her right now?
I actually do. I mean, if you take what is already out there in the media and you harp on an area of the votership that you have a huge lead, especially when you've seen Senator Sanders coming up a bit in South Carolina, where that firewall is, I believe, still very firm. I think it's legit. And quite frankly, not only did he not answer the question, but he did something that I always feel that candidates should never do, which is consistently mention the name of the current president who's not running for re-election or of their opponent. You want it to be about you. And if you didn't want to answer it, there is a different way to turn it. When he talks about poverty, and then he even admits that the African-American community are, you know, huge numbers of that in impoverished number. I think he could have answered this. He certainly could talk about how these people never got 40 acres and a mule, and if I were president, we would need to look at something. But the reparations that have been
I mean, perhaps he was caught a little bit off guard.
We need to go.
But it seems as though he's also trying to turn this back on her. What I'm wondering is, as she starts campaigning more and more in South Carolina, Leslie, are we going to hear her say, you need to be given this, that, and the other because of our past in America?
I'm honestly not sure that she would, simply because she has such a huge lead on him with minority voters and specifically within the African-American community. It would also have to be something, as she herself has said, Trish, she needs to be able to sell this. And I'm not sure that she would feel she needs to sell it. The other thing is she has not come out against them. You even heard Senator Sanders say, I believe she feels this way, where he was much more adamant about the president certainly not favoring reparations. So perhaps the question should be asked of Hillary Clinton.
I think it's got to be asked
as to whether or not she would support it.
You know, as for a political strategy, I mean, it maybe lasts a couple of days, but Brad, at some point, some reporter somewhere, if she'll let them do an interview with her, is going to say, Hillary Clinton, do you believe in slavery reparations? And if she starts to say yes, that's going to go to the next leg, and people are going to want to get her on record for what it is exactly that she does believe in. And I think she could probably take a big hit politically, I guess, from anyone who doesn't think that that's a sustainable path for us to pursue, given our limitations in this economy.
Look, shame on the Democrats. They're talking about poverty and oppression that happened over 100 years ago. Look what's happening today. 10 of our most impoverished cities are run by Democrats. It's rife with crime and corruption and dependency and drugs and dropout. And where have they been here and now? Bernie's right. It should be about the future. But the problem is the present. There is no future for these people. That's what they think, because they've been let down by the very people who profess to be caring for them.
The reality is this is the law of unintended consequences. I mean, really, you look at the Democratic economic policies that have been put in place, and hey, we all want to help people, right? I mean, we all share that goal. But if you're a single mom living in New Hampshire, home first in the nation, you're getting roughly $38,000 a year from the government for staying home and not working. Now, I mean, people make logical decisions. And if I'm a single mom and I have a choice between going to work every day and having to figure out how the heck I got to get my kids to daycare and this, that, and the other, versus collecting a check from the government and I can stay home and take care of my kids, you can understand why a lot of women are making the decision to take that check, that handout from the government. It's nearly $60,000 that they get a year in Hawaii. And this, I think, Leslie, is an example of policies meant to do good, but actually hold people back. And we have seen this throughout the country, Chicago, of course, being the latest example. I mean, how do the Democrats spin a new economic message knowing that their policies have failed, Leslie?
Well, Republican policies and what they constantly propose is to benefit the rich. So obviously, any legislation you're going to pass to benefit the rich, using your example of that 38-year-old woman in New Hampshire, is not going to benefit her. Whether it is daycare, whether it is preschool, all of which Republicans want to cut, whether it's, hey, we'll give you some work training or paid education. Republicans don't want that. Or we will help you, and we will help you get off this program. If you remember years ago, we had former Governor Tommy Thompson, a Republican, and President Clinton, not Mrs. Clinton, her husband, a Democrat, wanting something that I was in favor of, which was welfare to work. That blew up. So unless we honestly have in this country, left and right, able to work together, then
but how do you have that conversation, Leslie, when you're talking about slavery reparations? How do you have that honest conversation when you're talking about more freebies and more handouts and we're going to pay you for the sins of the past?
Well, look at Senator Sanders. Even before the discussion of reparations, he is doing and has continued to do quite well running as a Democratic socialist, but also saying, look, we need free community college. We need free education. We need to just stop this income inequality. We need to stop Wall Street and corporate ownership of politicians. He's doing well. So obviously this resonates with people, and not just Democrats. We see independents and even Republicans who like Bernie, who do not like what Trump or Cruz are selling.
Yeah, I don't know how much it's about policy. Sometimes I think it also comes down to personality, and there are a lot of Democrats right now that like Bernie's personality and they like his energy, but if they actually looked really hard and they figured out most of their paycheck was going to wind up going to the government, I wonder if they'd rethink it. Brad and Leslie, thank you so much.
Thanks
Good to
so
have
much.
you guys here. All right,
Thank
as
you,
all
Trish.
the action gets underway